Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, I'm Flight Lieutenant Peter Lisney, and in this episode, we'll listen to the best bits of our top 10 episodes. We'll also reheat a few of the top stories from the past year. But first, see if you can identify this noise. Find out if you're right at the end of this episode. Now, Inside Air launched on the 12th of January 2021. To mark our first anniversary, we thought we'd replay some memorable moments from the top 10 episodes so far, based on downloads on release day. To start our countdown, in 10th place, we join SAC Emma Kerwin in episode 20, as she went to find out more about military working dogs.
Another important question is, what's the future for the military working dog, especially when there's things like drones being used within the military? Squadron leader Brocky doesn't think they'll be replaced by technology just yet.
Yeah, there'll always continue to be a role for military working dogs, certainly in the deployed environments. I mean, you think about rapid escalation of warfare, and generally if we deploy somewhere, there's going to be a lack of infrastructure from a control of entry perspective, force protection perspective on the initial entry teams. So we need to maintain those roles in the UK as well as overseas, but obviously to be able to then deploy as and when we need to, and for all those future operations. We've obviously proven the dogs in the deserts, in the far and Middle East. Certainly from an army side, obviously sitting here, I see both sides of the house. Yeah, we've got dogs over in the jungles that will do tracker work with the infanteers when they're under a particular jungle training environment. I'd be very surprised in our lifetimes if technology can replicate a dog's sensory sort of smell anyway. Certainly, obviously, infrared technology and using drones, for example, to coin a current sort of phrase is, I think they would work well together, most definitely. But I think from a tracking and sniffing and sensing assets, the dogs are still there. Be that for humans or weapons, drugs, etc. There's still going to be a need for the dog in the future.
In 9th position is episode 15, Helicopter Pilot Training. Having earned his wings at RAF Shawbury, in this clip, Flight Lieutenant Curry told us how he was trained for when things go very wrong.
If I hadn't joined the Air Force, I honestly don't know what I'd be doing now. Some of the places I've been, the people I've met, the experiences I've got, some of the best things I've done. So even the hard things, the things which are funny but not fun. So they're not fun while you're doing them, but they'll make for a funny story afterwards. One that was funny for everyone watching, but not for me, was the day that I went to the Dunker. So the Dunker is probably an apt description of what it actually does. It's like being a rich tea biscuit, but it's called the Helicopter Underwater Escape Trainer. It's down at Yeovilton in Somerset, and it teaches you how to get out of a helicopter that's crashed into the water. So as aircrew, you'll fly over the water, and this is just something you have to do. It's part and parcel of the survival training. So I am a confident swimmer, and thought I could hold my breath for about a minute and a half underwater, which I felt like it was okay. But I was then strapped into what equates to, if you imagine a roller coaster ride, I was strapped into something that looked not unlike that, and suspended above a swimming pool. Then all the lights were turned off. Then I was unceremoniously dropped into the water. The whole contraption turned upside down, and at that point, when all violent motion ceases, you have to try and get out. I made it out the first time, but you have to complete the serial 6 times. To give you a spoiler at the end of the story, I completed it 9 times. I tried to swim out of the front window, which is a large plexiglass contraption. I kicked the safety diver in the chest while trying to work out exactly where I was going. He wasn't very happy about that. I eventually made it out of the correct exit, but I had lost a piece of the survival equipment along the way. I'd made it out without it, but apparently I then had to swim back in and get it. And at the end of the serial, as I said, I felt like a rich tea biscuit who's been dunked too many times. But the Spanish spend 3 days doing that course that we spend doing a morning of. So what they do, I honestly don't know, and I never want to do an exchange to Spain. I remember being on my survival training, the initial survival training you do, where you get thrown out into the woods for a week to sort of see if you'll survive. I remember very vividly during a night where I don't think it stopped training for about 3 days, saying, I don't think that anyone flying for BA has to do this. Do I really want to be here? And at the time I felt miserable, but now I can look back on it and go, you know what, that was actually quite a lot of fun. But that's an experience that if I hadn't joined the RAF, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to have.
At number 8 of our top 10 Inside Air episodes is episode 5, Inside RAF Apprenticeships. Following the cancellation of the RAF Apprenticeship Awards due to lockdown, Flight Lieutenant Chris Sully spoke with one of the organisers, Flight Lieutenant Duncan Pope.
The Apprenticeship Awards were due to take place at Cosford, at RAF Cosford, at the museum at RAF Cosford. They just slipped away because we had this horrible virus that came around, COVID. So unfortunately, they got cancelled, and it was going to be a really important year. It was going to be the 100th anniversary of Royal Air Force apprenticeships. So yes, the RAF was formed in 1918, but apprentices started in 1920. So it was going to be a very important year for us. But circumstances got the better of us, unfortunately. The awards were still presented. We'd still had all our winners. But what happened with those awards is that we sent them to the stations where each of our winners were based. And they were presented with their awards by the station commander at their own awards events. So a little bit lower key than maybe we would have hoped, but nevertheless the right thing was done, and the right thing being that we wanted to make sure that they were recognised with that award by their group captain, their station commander at their own stations.
So a virtual award ceremony, listen, if it's good enough for the Oscars, it's good enough for the RAF, I guess, in that situation. The opportunity to go and talk to some of the award recipients for 2020 came to us at the RAF Media Reserves. We took that opportunity. We went out and met some of the team, some of them remotely, some of them face-to-face. These are some of the award recipients from 2020.
I think the most challenging part of the apprenticeship so far has been getting to grips with the terminology that the civilians use. It's very different to how we at the military talk about aviation, but it's also been one of the most interesting parts of the apprenticeship, because it's given me an insight to the civilian aviation world.
So the most challenging thing about completing an RAF apprenticeship, halfway during I found out I was going to become a father for the first time, which then led me to want to complete what is designed to be a 3-year course, because I knew I was going to have my hands full when my son came along, which I was correct.
The best thing is that it's helped me learn, and it's something that's can help with promotion as well within my career. It also helps me if I did ever want to leave the RAF. It helps me to get a job within the same trade.
The best thing about completing an RAF apprenticeship is the qualifications gained during the apprenticeship and skills learnt, as well as the opportunities to do adventurous training and play sport with the RAF.
I think through doing the apprenticeship, the best thing for me was making some really good friends that I think I'll keep in touch with them for a long time because they've always been there for me.
The military offers you the chance to progress in your education. So some people may have come straight out of school, not had the chance to go to college or go to university. So I don't see why you would turn down free education when you're given time to do it at work and in your own hours as well. So it's a win-win situation for me.
As well as helicopter training making the top 10, episode 17, UK Military Flying Training System, came in at number 7. We joined Flight Lieutenant Alex and Flight Lieutenant Harry from 4 Squadron at RAF Valley.
The intensity and workflow as you go through flying training just increases as you work through different aircraft, move from the Prefect onto the Texan and then onto the Hawk. And with us culminating in the op phase at the end of Force Squadron, you're putting together everything you've learned over those multiple years preceding that into one big exercise, which simulates what you're going to be doing on the front line. And it takes a lot of mental capacity and preparation to be able to prosecute the targets and the enemy aircraft to the required standard.
And as we progress through training, obviously the aircraft get faster and faster, which means you get places quicker. That leaves you less time to think about what you need to do, so you really need to be ahead of the jet with anything that you're doing. The flying really needs to be second nature to thinking about how to operate the aircraft and what you're going to do when you get there. Additionally, when we're flying intercepts against hostiles, we're sort of head-to-head, so the closure rate is even greater, which really compresses the timeline and really gets the pressure going.
Finally finished the course and being told you're going to graduate from fast jet training was such a relief and such a sense of achievement when it finally happened, and just looking forward to the next stage and moving on to the front line.
So getting down from that last op trip and getting the sort of handshake of you've passed the course was a really good experience. It's been a long time coming, years in the making, so it was a great relief and also really exciting, because that's the sort of last bit of training now before we get onto the front line and start doing what we've trained to do.
In 6th place is Episode 6, RAF in 2040, Fact from Fiction. This is where the Chief of the Air Staff, Sir Mike Wigston, shared his vision for the RAF of the future.
Rapid fire!
Can you tell me more about the role of diversity in the Royal Air Force and how that will contribute to our future?
Yes, I mean that is a really important question for me, and as the team around me know, and anybody that's sort of seen and heard me around the Royal Air Force will know it's something that's really, really important to me. And I always characterize it in three strands, if you like. At the strategic level, we have to, and going back to our previous conversation around the importance of people going forward, we need the cream of the pool of UK talent to be able to be attracted and to be recruited into the Royal Air Force. So we have to attract the widest possible pool of talent, which means we have to attract more than young white men. We need to attract everybody in society. We're also facing the reality that our public and our parliamentarians, our media is becoming less tolerant of us not being representative of society, whether that's the relatively small number of women we've got or the even smaller numbers of people from ethnic minorities. So there's a strategic credibility and reputation for us as a fighting force alongside the Army and the Navy, who have to represent the society that we defend. So there's a really powerful strategic imperative for getting our diversity right and our inclusion. Then at a sort of operational level, if you like, the decision making from a diverse group in that increasingly complex world that we are operating in, a diverse group will be much more able to make sense of what we're looking at and make sense of everything that's going around us, and we will make better decisions by having a diverse group of perspectives and cultural backgrounds and gender backgrounds and everything else, and we will make fewer bad decisions as a result. So there's a real imperative around decision making. And then finally, the third one, if you like, is at the personal level, because we need to be a force. We must be a force where everybody can come in and bring their whole self to work. We cannot have people who feel constrained or feel that they can't play a full part or unable to play a full part, because we need to harness everybody's potential and everything that they bring, and we will only do that by being truly diverse. So for me, it's something that really, really matters, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. And as anybody who knows me, they get that loud and clear.
We're now halfway through our Inside Air Top 10 countdown. At number 5 is episode 13, RPAS, Not Drones, the humans behind the systems. In this clip, Flight Lieutenant Sully asked members of 13 Squadron whether they accept their remotely piloted aircraft systems being called drones.
I'm going to ask you a controversial question now. I'm going to ask it of all three of you. We talk about RPAS systems and we talk about UAVs and whatever else. The public still, and the newspapers love calling them drones. Is that a real embargoance, or is it something you just accept that, well, that's the way the public refer to them?
I don't think we're ever going to change the public now. There was a chance maybe 10 years ago to change the narrative from drone to RPA or UAV or something like that, and it just didn't happen. So now, whereas we might call drones the little small quadcopters that people have for sort of hobbies, the public don't. So I think we need to embrace the fact that we might doctrinally call ourselves RPAs or RPAs, and we are so different to everything else that a public-owned drone quadcopter might be. The public still think we're drone pilots, and that's what they call us. So it's up to us to make sure the message goes out that regardless of what they call us, they understand what we do and how we do it, and how we're not really that different from any other aircraft the Air Force flies, other than we can stay airborne for a significantly longer time.
And presumably, Danny, from the perspective of the ability of the platform itself, the ability to stay in that location for a longer period of time, actually it gives you more of a chance to build up that intelligence picture and decide on where you're going.
Yeah, so one of the key things for us, particularly when it comes to engagements, is just understanding that pattern of life. The longevity of the aircraft and, the persistence that we have means that we can stay there for a long time, build up a decent pattern of life for a number of hours. Whereas our fast jet counterparts, they may be able to provide an hour or two, and then they would have to go and refuel if they needed to come back, whereas we can stay. And what that gives you is the amount of time that we can actually stay, as we can see the differences maybe between the pattern of life during the day and then the pattern of life during the night, or the pattern of life during an episodic event. So given the current places where we are, prayer times and things like that.
Sean, we talked a little bit about the use of the word drones and stuff, and there is a public perception of what the platform is in their mind. From your perspective, what would you say to those people who see it as a war game, people not sort of making decisions on logic basis? Because presumably nothing has changed from the operator's point of view.
No, I would just like to say that this isn't anything clever. This is fly-by-wire. It's just a really long wire. But what we are able to do through connectivity is ensure that the ground commander has the right intelligence, and we can offer that through persistence. And when we are making a decision, or someone else is making a decision, we're enacting that. It's based on sound intelligence, real-time intelligence, which we couldn't always offer with legacy platforms. But a force mix of that is really, really capable. And the other thing with the word drone, like the guys said, we're not necessarily going to change the term, but what we can do is help educate and influence the younger generation now on what that term means. It's certainly nothing to be afraid of. It came with a lot of negative connotations, but I think over time and with a generation shift, that term is going to people will start to understand the term drone as remotely piloted and not be afraid of it. It's just at the moment it's still quite different.
At number 4 is episode 9, which celebrated 50 years of UKMAS, the RAF's Mobile Air Movement Squadron based at RAF Bryce Norton. Flight Lieutenant Amy Casey spoke with members past and present.
I reached out to the RAF Movements Association to find out if any veterans who previously served with UKMAS would be happy to share some of their stories. UKMAS veteran Ian Berry.
Well, I actually joined as an admin apprentice in 1965 at the tender age of 16 years and 2 months. First time at UKMAS, I went up to Kinloss on Operation Delivery Boy. This was a national dock strike. Anyway, once that was over, we ended up in Denmark at Veerloos for exercise Ruby Signet, which was the largest parachute exercise since Arnhem. And we had a whole parachute brigade then. It was a mass Hercules formation of 48 aircraft.
How many of you from UKMAS were supporting that massive exercise?
There was probably about 30 of us. There was 3,000 people dropped by air. There was 3,000 parachutes.
We could look at your incredible career and talk about, oh my goodness me, so many different exercise and operations that you've been involved with. But have you got a highlight from your career? Is there something that sticks in your mind that was really demonstrated what UKMAS was all about?
It really is difficult. I really got 101% job satisfaction out of the whole thing. It was absolutely fantastic camaraderie, and the teamwork was something else. Some of the aircrew used to be very jealous of us because we were so well organised.
Let's talk about this rivalry, because you're not the first person to tell me about this good banter that you had going on between the two crews.
They get sorted out, but there is some fun and games. There's another story. We actually went down to Belize. One of the ports of call was Bermuda. There was a bit of ribbing with the crew. Got you into the Castle Harbour, which is a 5-star hotel, best on the island. Off you go. And so the crew were really impressed, and off they went. And then Arthur said, right, he said, you're actually in the same hotel where they're in the main building. You've actually got the VIP chalets on the coast. The crew were not aware of any of this. We didn't dare tell them until we were on our way back out. They wouldn't have fed us.
Ian, it is so lovely to hear your stories. And I'd just like to bring into the conversation now the Officer Commanding UKMAS Squadron Leader Maddie Smith. Maddie, you've been listening to Ian's incredible life of service. How has that made you feel?
Well, it's made me smile a lot. There's so many of your stories that I hear the same thing now. Not so much of the fancy VIP suites that you get in the Caribbean, but certainly the banter and the camaraderie. And I'm really pleased that you said how the teamwork was something that's really stuck with you, because having been, lucky enough to get away on a couple of tasks recently, it's really great to see small teams of people working. But unlike it was when you were on the squadron, you had a dedicated team that you almost always worked with. We now expect people to work with different teams all the time, and sometimes that can mean 3, 4, 10 tasks in a row. You're not working with the same people, and yet they achieve this amazing rapport really quickly and deliver the same movements output. It's brilliant.
We're now down to the top 3 of the most listened to episodes of Inside Air, and in third place is episode 24, where we look back at the career of the E3D Sentry airborne warning and control system as it bowed out of RAF service after 30 years. Squadron leader Darren Scales went on board to chat with Group Captain Rob O'Dell and Group Captain Jim Belden.
But of course, we'd also have post-mission debrief. We'd often have a quick debrief in the area behind the mission crew areas, commonly known as a ballroom, where there's not a usefully empty area. We'd get together, particularly with the airborne technicians, to review the mission, and that was ahead of when we landed, where the whole crew would get together and be led by the captain, who was always the pilot, for the full crew debrief.
I guess that the one group of people that would not be there for the debrief would be the pilots of the other aeroplanes, the fighters that you were working with and stuff like that. So was there an opportunity to engage with them? Or sorry?
Well, you've jogged a memory of mine. I'm going to ask Rob perhaps to expand on it a bit, but there are occasions when you do meet. So on exercises like Red Flag, and both at Nellis in Nevada and at Elmendorf and Fairbanks in Alaska, I'm reminded of an incident where we did exactly have a big debrief, and there was one occasion. I think it's important to know where do we get our feedback from about where we judge ourselves to be in terms of our effectiveness, and very often it's the feedback we get from those whom we've controlled. And over a number of years you meet other aviators at various forums and they go, you're the Brit AWACS, you were absolutely fantastic on that particular operation, and that's lovely to hear, and it kind of validates what we think. But also in those big exercises like Red Flags, you are tested and you get debriefed debriefed pretty thoroughly. But there's one occasion, Rob, I remember back in, I think, 1997 or 98 at Cape Thunder in Alaska, when you, I think, came up with a plan which really surprised a lot of people, not least the F-15s, the US F-15s, when we had the Tornado F-3, which wasn't regarded at that time as being the world's best fighter aircraft. And I think we developed some interesting tactics, including some spoofing on the radios, which actually really upset the apple cart that day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was a really, it was almost a seminal exercise, that, because as Jim said, the Tornado F3 at the time, it was designed for long-range interception. It wasn't as agile as the F-15s that the US Air Force were flying. And in that particular exercise, we were actually flying red air, so we were simulating the enemy defending against a large strike package, which was being controlled by an American AWACS. So there was a fair bit of competition going on, and we were flying from the same US Air Force AWACS Ops Squadron. So the Tornadoes at the time, they had not yet got the AMRAAM missile, whereas the F-15s had got the latest AMRAAM missile. But what they had got and had just been introduced was the JTIDS data link, and that enabled us to give a portion of our air picture silently into the cockpit of the Tornadoes. And that allowed them to do some really radically different tactics. Long story short is that when we briefed, the American F-15s walked for the exercise flight that day on the first time we did this, very confident. I heard one of them even say, they're F-3s, it won't be a problem. A few hours later, we returned, and the Tornadoes had shot down every single F-15 in the exercise on that day, and including one guns kill, which was particularly embarrassing for any red-blooded fighter pilot. And we'd even, later on in the exercise, on a particular scenario, we managed to get one of the Tornado F-3s to shoot down the American AWACS, which again is a big thing for an AWACS to get shot down on an exercise. You've always got to protect your AWACS because that's the crown jewels. So we had a fantastically successful exercise, and I remember that first day, the F-15 crew pilots walking back in for the debrief, the mass debrief, in absolute shock, not quite believing what had just happened. And that was, as Jim says, that was a particularly memorable sortie and exercise.
A very late but hugely popular entry to Inside Air's top 10 was episode 28, Life as an RAF Musician. I caught up with trumpeter senior aircraftman Alan Thomas as he prepared to perform at the National Service of Remembrance in London. So you talked about preparation. Could you tell us how many seconds you will be playing for this morning, and then put that in the context of how many hours of preparation and rehearsals you've conducted?
Well, I think the Reveille lasts about 20 seconds. I mean, the thing is, there's no chance to redeem yourself on something like that. We're playing the trumpets we play don't have any valves, so there's only actually 5 notes we need to play on the instrument. Some of them more than once, but I think that's the hardest thing. It's just so short. I mean, we are playing more than that. We're playing 4 marches on the way up, and we're playing as the veterans march past the cenotaph, and then 4 more marches on the way back. So there is plenty to do. But this is the big moment in the spotlight.
And how long has the band been rehearsing as a group?
For this occasion, it's been over the course of this week. RAF Music Services is really busy because there's also been a band playing at the Royal Albert Hall for the Festival of Remembrance, and also then there's other preparation for other things in the next few weeks. So we're kept on our toes.
Now, I've noticed something here today in the canteen where all the RAF musicians, they're not wearing their tunics because they're having their breakfast. Now, everyone in the Air Force, we tend to wear shirts. Can you tell us what RAF musicians wear under their tunics?
Oh dear, we're giving the game away now. I think it's probably what you wear under your tunics is your only chance to have a bit of self-expression. So there's a variety of rock concert T-shirts, football shirts, all sorts of things. I think the main thing also is you want something comfortable under there, because under a greatcoat and a tunic it can get pretty warm, you know. So yeah, but I think it's quite nice. It shows a bit of the different personalities.
You have to tell us what are you wearing under your tunic?
I've got I think a 10-year-old Southampton Football Club shirt. So yeah, obviously I've had a few over the years, but I quite like this one. It's quite comfortable. So yeah, and it just makes me feel a little bit more at home.
It's quite a relaxed atmosphere in here as your colleagues are preparing, they're chatting, they're drinking cups of tea, they've just finished their cooked breakfast. What is going through their minds at the moment? We're, about 20 minutes away from moving off? What's going through the minds?
I think most people will be. I mean, a lot of people here have done it loads of times before, so they know exactly what's involved. I'm still thinking about the different jaw movements and what I've got to do at certain times, but also I think it's really, really key to stay relaxed. You can't stay on edge the whole time. You have to actually switch off. So I think having a bit of a natter and a cup of tea is a good way to prepare. But you can bet your bottom dollar that as soon as we step out onto the parade square, that everyone will be focused and switched on.
We have finally reached the #1 most popular Inside Air episode on day of release. In episode 4, Wing Commander Howard Leader turned to former Tornado navigator John Nichol and F-35 pilot Flight Lieutenant Bally to discuss the evolution of fast jet ground attack.
So you're using the radar to update the attack system, and luckily the Iraqis had built a massive metal fence around their airfield. And so that stood out like the dog's gonads on a radar. And so we had a really accurate system. So I could see, I could sense a little bit of flak, but at night the guys could see it. During the day, you kind of couldn't see much from the back. At the front, the guys could see puffs of smoke, kind of daytime. You know, if you remember the old World War II films with puffs of smoke going off, they could see that. I could see flares coming out on my right because we were pumping out flares like Billio from 30 feet, because obviously any heat-seeking missiles would easily be able to pick us out. These were the days before any heat-seeking missile were receivers. Bally talked about his radar receiver, and we had that, but we didn't have any heat-seeking missile infrared detectors. So I could see flares going out on my right as somebody climbed up to deliver. We climbed up. There's the most monumental cock-up in our aircraft. You know, almost certainly my fault. The bombs don't come off. And so we're now in a jet, in a Tornado, with 8 1,000-pound bombs on, and in a loft recovery. Bally, because he's a pilot, he's part of the two-winged master race. He would be able to explain this better. But you've got 30 degree up. The bombs come off, and as they come off, you have to overbank in our case, to your left, and you overbank past what would be vertical. So you've got 135 degree of bank on. So your cockpit is looking down at the sand. You're now near, not quite inverted, 180 degrees would be inverted, but you're near inverted, but you're not meant to have 8 1,000 pounds of bombs on your backside. So we've still got 8 1,000 pounds of bombs.
Yeah, God.
Now, JP, thank God, he was actually a pretty half-decent pilot. He managed to recover us. So we get back to low level, and this is kind of quite an important point. We are now kicking the verbal crap out of ourselves. I got it wrong, there's no doubt about that. But we now are ashamed. So this is the very first RAF low-level attack since time immemorial, and I have cocked it up. And so the first thing that we talk about is re-attacking. Now that's an anathema. That's ludicrous. So, but we talk about it for about 2 seconds and decide this is a terrible idea. So I then dump the bombs. I jettison the bombs. So we throw 8 1,000-pound live bombs into the desert, and we're exiting. And JP gets it to low level, and we're back down to 30 feet, and we're heading home at about 30 feet. And I can't probably 2 minutes later. So away from the target, we can see what looks as though it's a communications, little kind of cabins, aerials. I call JP to break away from it, and we go south of it, and then suddenly there is the most monumental bang, and it is like being hit by an express train. And so we're flying along at 30 feet. JP's flying. I'm sitting there, fat, dumb, and happy. We're 30 feet, looking up at blue sky. There is the most monumental explosion, and it's like being hit by. I'm looking up the blue sky, flying straight and level. The aircraft suddenly explodes left, and I'm no longer looking up at blue sky. I'm looking up at brown sand at 30 feet. I presume it was the sand that was brown at that particular moment. And the aircraft is completely out of control. Again, JP, my God, he's the only reason we're still alive, gets control of it. We nearly hit the ground, but he recovers it. And then we are now, so in the Tornado, it's all fly-by-wire. Our jet is no longer fly-by-wire. We are now fly-by-pony. All we've got is the most basic metal controls that are connected to two main control surfaces, the tailplanes at the back. And we're wallowing around like drunken hippopotamuses. He manages to make sure we don't hit the ground, but we've got a right-hand engine fire, or the hydraulics I can't remember. We've taken AAA anti-aircraft artillery, and the sidewinder on the wing has exploded. And so the sidewinder you carried we had on both wings. Bally will remember the image. Our sidewinder has taken around a bullet from the ground, and it's gone through the missile. The missile has ignited on the aircraft, but it's stuck on the rail. So it's now it's acting like a welding torch. And I look out the right-hand side of the aircraft and the right-hand wing, and I can see what looks like a laser. There's a beam of laser flame, and it's cutting through the right-hand wing, and I can see it. It's actually cut through the wing, and it's moving, and I can see that the wing is probably going to come off in the not-too-distant future. And there's flames coming from the back where the missile hit. The engine's on fire. The flames are moving steadily to where I sit in the rear seat of the aircraft. And that is then. So we're kind of fighting this for, I'm going to hazard a guess, a minute, 90 seconds. We're trying to basically, we ignore all of the routing, all of the safe corridors. We turn south and head straight for the border. So because we're hoping that we can get away from any Iraqi troop positions. If we can get away from them, we might get rescued if we come out. If we can get across the border, we'll be fat, dumb, and happy. But the flames are now kind of, I can see them in the. We've got rear view mirrors in the Tornado, and I can see them coming towards me, and the whole of the back of the aircraft is gone. There's nothing there. It's just flame, and all I can see is it marching to where I sit. And I said to JP, we got to get out. We put a couple of calls out. I broadcast our position, and that was it. We kind of count down, eject, and we're out. And that was, my war was over. It was the shortest war in the world.
My goodness. What a bit. Wow.
Absolutely incredible retelling, John. Given that the object now is to trace the development of our frontline jets from that point, Bally, I'm going to give you the opportunity now to potentially make John a little bit jealous. What have you got on the F-35, for example, that John would have yearned for in those days?
No navigator, terrible jet, no navigator.
I know. Well, that is the one thing I truly miss from the Tornado.
This is a serious question, Bally. As somebody who flew a two-crew aircraft like you know what the camaraderie was like. You know what what it was like. Not because the squadrons were big, there was a load of us, but having somebody in the jet to have a natter with on a 4, I don't know what you guys do. I think the longest op I did was probably 7 hours or something like that. That must be bloody lonely at times.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's a lonely place to be, being on your own. And I do genuinely miss the camaraderie within the cockpit. I mean, obviously the camaraderie on the squadron is still very much alive. And I suppose, in those quiet moments, the wingman replaces the navigator as the person who you might want to chat with a little bit on the radio, and I can't deny that sometimes happens. But there was something great about working as a team, as a two-man team in a tornado, and when you were really on your game, things would happen, and you wouldn't even really have to speak to each other because you just knew where to look in the cockpit. But the F-35 I absolutely love. It really is a pilot's aircraft, and the thing it does is it gives you as the pilot the capacity to do so much more, by how simplified the flying controls are, and how much information and how user-friendly a manner it is presented to you, and also the equipment we've got on board. So I think perhaps the one thing that, given the story we've just heard, that might make John jealous is that we have a system that will detect those heat-seeking missiles. So we might have had a better chance of being able to defend ourselves against that. And I think the other thing is, now we're at medium level, and it's all about sharing information and trying to know where those systems are that might target you. And you're never going to know where they all are, but to know with better fidelity where those things are. And that's what our aircraft does. The sensors are phenomenal. We can extremely accurately pinpoint the radar systems that are the key threats to us at medium level, very accurately. And then we can share that information with the package. So the Tornadoes, when I left it, we had a data link that would let us share information between ourselves and other platforms, which I think probably wasn't. Well, that was a GR4 thing, so it was
definitely not. Definitely nothing like that.
Yeah, and those things, by that system, we can share that information. So you've got the Tornado crew that might be doing something somewhere else, or now maybe a Typhoon crew that's doing something in another part of the operations area, and we may be able to identify a threat system that's in their vicinity, and we can instantly share that information with them across the systems, and hopefully make them more survivable. So that's kind of our role, really, is to we're a highly capable platform ourselves, but also we enhance the survivability and the lethality of the other platforms that we have.
Well, that's Inside Air's top 10 episodes so far. I'm sure you'll join us in thanking our guests who've shared their stories, and our presenters and production team for making it all happen. And of course, we'd like to thank you for listening, and hope you'll continue to subscribe, rate and review us. Coming up in our second year, we'll keep inviting you behind the wire to meet the RAF's people, hear about the tech we use, and even join us on operations and exercises worldwide.
I'm SAC Victoria Andrews, and as the podcast marks its first birthday, we look back at the year that was for the RAF. The Air Force's people were at the heart of our Reheat News roundups. Personnel deployed on multiple exercises around the world, training and practicing key skills in a range of environments. RAF Coningsby Station Commander, Group Captain Matt Peterson, was able to tell us why exercises are so important.
The importance of working with our allies, and actually why we have done it for so very many years, is really obvious. We are much strengthened by this type of exercising, and also it is borne fruit when we deliver our operations away from home base across the world.
These exercises would mean the Air Force was prepared and ready for operations in support of NATO and allied partners. We continue to support the NHS and government in its fight against COVID-19, helping with the rollout and delivery of vaccines, supporting the ambulance service and the distribution of fuel to forecourts. Acknowledging the contribution made by Air Force personnel on a daily basis at home and abroad, The Chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Sir Mike Wigston, had this to say during Armed Forces Week.
We can be very proud of everything our people do, protecting the UK and our allies around the globe, and projecting the United Kingdom on a global stage.
We invested and upgraded our platforms, while some celebrated significant milestones. The Chinook marked 40 years in service, and Flight Lieutenant Ewan Lister explained why the iconic helicopter is still in such high demand.
We're now up to 24.5 tonnes all-up mass of the aircraft, which is just a phenomenal lift capability that offers so much flexibility to commanders, and it is proven why the Chinook is in such demand both in the UK for tasking and on operations all over the world.
Meanwhile, new platforms like the F-35 Lightning and Poseidon aircraft were delivered to RAF Marham and RAF Lossiemouth, and in the USA, key tests in the development of the new Protector or G Mark I remotely piloted aircraft system were completed. Leaving service, we said goodbye to the E3D Sentry and Sentinel OR-1 aircraft. The Air Force embraced other new technologies too, as the organisation commits to reducing carbon emissions and achieving net zero by 2040. A fleet of electric cars came into service at RAF Leeming and RAF Wittering, and at RAF Marham, e-scooters are now helping staff travel around the huge station. Pioneering work in fuel has also meant that the RAF has been able to trial synthetic fuels. Our people represented us in many ways. We remembered the fallen at commemoration events, we competed at inter-service and elite level sport, raised money for those less fortunate than ourselves, and continue to evolve as a modern Air Force. As you can imagine, this doesn't cover the half of it. For all RAF news, visit our website and social platforms.
I'm SAC Simon Ross with this episode's Name That Noise. That was the sound of an Atlas A400M landing on a semi-prepared runway. Entering operational service with the Royal Air Force in 2014, the Atlas A400M provides tactical airlift and strategic oversized lift capabilities, complementing those of the Hercules and C-17 fleets. It will accommodate 116 fully equipped troops, 9 aircraft pallets, vehicles, helicopters including a Chinook, and mixed loads. Loads are delivered by parachute, gravity extraction from the rear ramp, or by landing. The A400M has the ability to carry a 37-ton payload over 2,000 nautical miles to established and remote airfields, as well as short unprepared or semi-prepared strips.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review and subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.